The microphone trembled in her hand. Millions watching, then silence. One note could save her career. One crack could end it forever. But what happened next? No one saw it coming. Hello, my amazing story family. I'm thrilled you're here with me today because the story I'm about to share with you will leave you speechless. Before we dive into the story, I have one small favor to ask. If you're ready for a story that'll send chills down your spine, please hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to drop a comment with your city. I love connecting with my story family from all corners of the world. For those who've already subscribed and joined our incredible community, welcome back. You're in for something special today, and tomorrow I have another mind-blowing story lined up that you won't want to miss. Now, let's dive into today's story and see what unfolds. The city of Atlanta hummed differently now. The streets that once felt like quiet background to Trinica John's daily commutes now buzzed with people recognizing her. A week had passed since her stunning performance at the National Music Showcase, and the echoes of that night still followed her everywhere she went. Everywhere. On the bus, teenagers nudged each other and whispered her name, pulling out their phones to confirm it was her. In the corner store near her apartment, the clerk played her performance clip on a small TV behind the counter, his eyes darting between the screen and her face as if he were seeing a ghost. Even at church, a place she had once gone unnoticed in the back pews, parishioners craned their necks to catch sight of her, as if her voice had changed not just her life, but theirs, too. For Trinica, it was disorienting. A part of her wanted to shrink, to disappear back into the shadows where she had once hidden her gift. But another part, bigger, louder, felt the stirring of something else. Belonging. For the first time in her life, she was no longer invisible. Still, she clung to what felt familiar. That Friday evening, she tied her apron once more at the Magnolia House, the soul food restaurant where it had all begun. The smell of fried catfish, cornbread, and collard greens wrapped around her like an old blanket, grounding her in memories. She had told herself that no matter how much her life shifted, she wouldn't forget this place. But when she walked in, she knew instantly that things had changed. The line at the door stretched longer than she had ever seen. Customers held up their phones, some even calling friends to announce where they were. Raymond, the stocky manager with the gruff voice and hidden soft heart, practically beamed as he waved her inside. "There she is," he boomed. "The star herself." The crowd erupted in clapping, whistles, even a few shouts of her name. Trinica froze in the doorway, her pulse hammering. This was not what she wanted. Not here, not at her second home. She gave a polite smile, ducked her head, and hurried to the counter. But everywhere she moved that night, eyes followed. Some wanted pictures, others wanted autographs, and more than a few wanted to hear her sing. By the time her shift ended, she was exhausted, not from carrying trays, but from the heavy weight of expectation. That night, in her tiny apartment, she tried to unwind. She kicked off her worn shoes, set her apron aside, and boiled water for tea. But her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Notifications flooded the screen. Reporters requesting interviews, producers inviting her to meetings, strangers leaving endless comments. One message, though, made her pause. It wasn't from a fan, or a reporter, or David Calloway. It was from an unknown number. "Congratulations. But remember, fame is fragile. Be careful who you trust." Her breath caught. The words weren't cruel, but they weren't kind either. They felt ominous. She tried calling the number back, but it went straight to voicemail. Uneasy, she pushed the phone aside. But she couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, someone was watching her rise and waiting for her to stumble. The following morning brought another shock. As she scrolled through the latest headlines, one article leapt out. The waitress who sang her way to stardom. But is she ready for it? The article praised her talent, but cast doubt on her future. It suggested she was untrained, unprepared for the industry, and a temporary spark that might burn out as quickly as it ignited. And worse, alongside the article was a picture. Not from the showcase, not from the restaurant, but from the night before, As she stood outside her apartment in her plain work clothes, bags under her eyes, hair tied back, someone had followed her. She slammed the laptop shut, her stomach twisting. The city no longer just recognized her, it stalked her. Later that week, she met with David Calloway at a quiet cafe downtown. He arrived sharp as always, suit pressed, shoes shining, his calm demeanor as steady as stone. "You did something historic at the showcase," he said, sipping his coffee. "But now the real work begins. You've got momentum, Trinica. And momentum is gold, but it fades quickly if you don't use it." She nodded, though her mind was still clouded by the anonymous message, the invasive photo, the article's biting words. David leaned in, lowering his voice. "I've set up meetings. Record labels, producers, people who can take you from viral sensation to household name. But there's something you need to understand. They're not interested in who you are. They're interested in who they can make you." Her heart skipped. "And if I don't want to change?" David gave a slow, almost regretful smile. "Then you better be ready to fight for your voice. Because they will try to take it." That night, as she walked home, her thoughts churned. The city lights blurred around her, headlights flashing like questions she couldn't answer. Could she hold on to who she was in a world built to shape her into something else? She didn't have an answer, but she knew one thing. Every step forward came with eyes watching, judging, waiting. And sometimes, those eyes were closer than she realized. As she reached her apartment, she noticed a folded piece of paper slipped under her door. Her heart thudded as she bent to pick it up. It wasn't a bill. It wasn't junk mail. It was a printed photo of her, singing on stage at the showcase. But scrawled across the bottom, in black marker, were the words, "The world will hear you, but at what cost?" Her knees weakened, the paper trembling in her hands. She spun, scanning the dim hallway, but it was empty. The walls echoed with silence. Someone had been here. Someone had left this for her. And whoever it was, they wanted her to know she was not in control of her story anymore. The following Sunday, she returned to church, desperate for peace. The choir sang loudly, hands raised, voices rising like incense. She closed her eyes, trying to lose herself in the worship. But midway through the service, the pastor called her name. "Sister Trinica," he said warmly, gesturing for her to stand. "We are proud of you. The world has seen your gift, and we are blessed to call you our own. Would you lead us in a song today?" The congregation erupted in applause, urging her forward. Her throat tightened. She hadn't come here to perform. She had come to rest. But as she stepped reluctantly toward the pulpit, something unexpected happened. From the corner of her eye, she saw her mother, sitting 3 pews back, dressed in her simple Sunday best, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her mother, who was supposed to be in Jamaica, was here. Trinica froze mid-step, her breath stolen. Her mother lifted her eyes, but they weren't filled with pride. They were heavy with something else. Worry. And in that moment, as the congregation cheered for her to sing, Trinica realized that her victory wasn't hers alone to bear. Her family's sacrifices, her mother's doubts, her siblings' hopes, all of it was woven into her voice. She gripped the microphone, her hands trembling, as the room fell silent in anticipation. Would her mother finally see what the world saw? Or would she see only a daughter drifting too far from the path she was sent to walk? The answer, Trinica knew, would change everything. And just like that, the first step into her new world grew heavier than she had ever imagined. If you were in Trinica's shoes, what would you do? Hold fast to your true voice, or bend to the weight of expectation? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to support this channel. The cafe on Peachtree Street smelled of roasted beans and fresh croissants, but the sweetness of the air did nothing to calm Trinica's nerves. She sat at a corner table, her back straight, her hands clasped too tightly around a lukewarm mug of tea. Across from her, David Calloway scrolled through his phone, pausing every now and then to send a crisp reply to someone she couldn't see. "Today's important," he said finally, sliding his phone into his jacket pocket. This isn't just a meeting, it's an introduction. A test. A test. Her voice faltered. David leaned in, his sharp eyes locking onto hers. Record labels aren't looking for singers, Trinica. They're looking for investments. They want to know if you can sell, if you can be molded, if you can handle pressure. Her chest tightened. Molded. The word clung to her like damp clothes. Moments later, a sleek black car pulled up outside the cafe. David stood, buttoning his jacket with a fluid motion. They're here. The ride downtown was silent except for the hum of traffic. The city blurred past in streaks of light, and with every passing block, Trinica's pulse quickened. She had dreamed of this moment, meeting the people who could open doors she'd never dared approach. Yet now, as the car pulled into a tall glass building glittering in the sunlight, all she could think about was the voice in her head. Don't let them take what makes you you. Inside, the lobby gleamed with polished marble floors and high ceilings. Men in tailored suits and women in designer heels clicked past, their conversations clipped and purposeful. Trinica followed David through a maze of hallways until they reached a conference room. 3 people sat at the long table, a silver-haired man with sharp features, a younger woman with a piercing gaze, and a producer whose name Trinica recognized from countless radio hits. Their smiles were polite, but their eyes carried calculation. "Miss John," the silver-haired man said, standing to shake her hand. "We've been waiting for you." The meeting began with compliments. They praised her showcase performance, called her raw talent, and the voice the industry's been missing. She tried to smile, but each word landed like bait. Then came the offers. "We'll pair you with the best songwriters," the woman said, sliding a folder across the table. "We'll build your brand, polish your sound, make sure you're radio ready within 6 months." The producer leaned forward. "Gospel soul is beautiful, but it's niche. To really break through, we need crossover appeal. Something brighter. Pop-driven." Her stomach flipped. "Pop. Think of it as evolution," he said smoothly. "You have the voice to carry anything. Why limit yourself?" Trinica forced a polite nod, but inside, something cracked. Music had always been her sanctuary, her truth. Now it was being weighed and packaged like a product on a shelf. At first, she thought she could smile her way through it, until the woman slid a glossy sheet across the table. "This is the image we're envisioning for you," she explained. On the page was a mock-up. Her face, airbrushed and unrecognizable, framed by neon lights. The caption read, "Trina J, the next big pop sensation." Trina J, not even her real name. Her throat tightened. She looked at David, silently begging for rescue, but his expression gave nothing away. The silver-haired man cleared his throat. "We'd like you to consider signing with us. The contract's generous. We believe you can be global, but only if you're willing to trust us with the details." That night, back in her apartment, the folder lay on her table like a loaded weapon. She flipped through the pages, her hands trembling. Promises of tours, albums, endorsements, but every page was stamped with conditions, clauses, ownership. By the time she reached the final page, her chest ached. Signing meant security, fame, money to support her family for life. But it also meant losing herself. Her phone buzzed. It was Malik. "Trini, Mama showed us your video again. You sound like a star." His voice was pure joy, free of doubt. She pressed the phone to her ear, tears stinging her eyes. How could she tell him that the world didn't want her? They wanted someone else, someone shinier, easier to sell. The next morning, she met David again. The envelope was still in her bag, unopened, and signed. "Well?" he asked, his tone careful. She hesitated. "They want to change me. My name. My sound. Everything." David studied her quietly. "That's the industry. They take rough stone and cut it into diamonds. The question is, do you want to shine their way or your own?" She swallowed hard. "If I refuse." He leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Then you risk fading." And fading is worse than never being seen at all. That evening, she walked to the Magnolia House, hoping for clarity. The restaurant was as lively as ever, jazz spilling from the speakers, laughter bouncing off the walls. But as she stepped inside, a hush swept the room. Conversations paused. Forks froze midair. Then, from a booth near the stage, a voice rang out. Well, if it isn't the star herself. Trinica turned. Sitting at the booth was Vanessa. Her rival's smile was sharp, almost sweet, but her eyes glittered with malice. She tapped her phone against the table. I read the article about your label meetings. Tough choices, huh? Careful, Trini. The industry doesn't love nobodies who forget where they came from. Gasps rippled through the room. Trinica's pulse raced. How had Vanessa known? Those meetings were supposed to be private. Vanessa leaned closer, her voice low but cutting. The higher you climb, the farther you fall. And trust me, I'll be here to watch. Shaken, Trinica rushed to the kitchen, her hands trembling. How had Vanessa gotten her information? Who was feeding her details? When she finally stepped outside at closing time, a chill swept over her. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown message. This time it read, "She's not your only enemy. Be careful who sits at your table." Her blood ran cold. The warning wasn't about Vanessa. It was about someone closer. Days later, she found herself back in a studio, staring at a microphone. The producer played a track, catchy, shallow, nothing like her style. "Just sing it," he urged. "We'll auto-tune the rest." She opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat. Her voice cracked, breaking the melody apart. The producer sighed, muttering under his breath. Maybe she's not ready after all. The words cut like glass. But before she could respond, another voice broke in. David's. Strong. Sharp. She's ready. She just won't sing lies. The room fell silent. The producer stared, surprised. David rarely raised his voice. Trinica turned to him, stunned. For the first time, she saw not just a manager, but an ally willing to stand against the machine. And in that moment, she understood, if she was going to survive this world, she couldn't do it alone. The music industry had opened its arms to her, but not out of love, out of hunger. The question now was whether she'd be consumed or stand her ground. The night sky over Atlanta flickered with neon and headlights, but in Trinica's small apartment, the glow came only from her phone. She sat cross-legged on her bed, staring at the cracked ceiling as her mother's number rang overseas. It was nearly midnight in Georgia, but just morning in Jamaica. She knew her mother would be awake, sweeping the yard or boiling yam for breakfast. The phone clicked. Trini. Her mother's voice carried the same firmness it always had. Strong, steady, as though she were holding their entire family upright with nothing but her will. Yes, Mama. It's me. There was a pause, then the sound of her mother exhaling. The whole town's been talking about you. Malik showed everyone the video of your competition, even Pastor Lewis. A small smile tugged at Trinica's lips. She pictured her little brother, bouncing with excitement, proud to claim her as his sister. But her mother's tone shifted quickly. The spotlight can blind, Trini. Don't lose sight of why you went there. Your brother's school fees are still due, and your sister needs new shoes. Dreams won't buy those things. Her throat tightened. She had expected pride, maybe even joy. Instead, she felt the familiar sting of responsibility pressing heavier than ever. Mama, she whispered, I'm trying. The music, it could change everything for us. Her mother's silence was heavier than any words. When she finally spoke, her voice was sharp. Or it could change nothing. Don't gamble with your family's future. The call ended, leaving Trinica staring at the darkened screen, her chest hollow. The next day, she carried that weight into rehearsal. The studio was small, lined with padded walls and glowing red lights. David sat in the corner, flipping through notes, while a pianist played scales to warm her up. But her voice faltered. Notes that once flowed like water cracked midway. She pressed her hand to her throat, embarrassed. What's wrong? The pianist asked gently. Trinica shook her head. Just tired. But it wasn't fatigue, it was guilt. Every word from her mother replayed in her mind. Dreams won't buy school fees. Don't gamble with your family's future. And for the first time, her voice didn't feel like freedom. It felt like betrayal. That evening, as she walked back through Auburn Avenue, she noticed a small crowd gathered near a storefront. Gospel music spilled from a radio, and people swayed to the rhythm, clapping and singing in unison. She stopped, watching. The harmony reminded her of home, of nights when neighbors filled the hills with drums and laughter. For a moment, she let herself hum softly, blending with the stranger's joy. Then a man turned, recognition flashing in his eyes. "Ain't you that waitress? The one from the competition?" Others turned too. Phones appeared. Cameras flashed. The music stopped, replaced by shouts of, "Sing something. Sing for us." Her chest tightened. She wanted to refuse, to slip away unseen. But then a child at the front, a little boy with wide, curious eyes, looked at her the way her siblings once did, waiting for magic. Her throat ached as she whispered, "Not tonight." The disappointment was sharp, almost angry. Some muttered under their breath. One man scoffed, "Guess she's too good for us now." The crowd dissolved, leaving her standing alone on the sidewalk, shame burning hotter than the streetlights. When she reached her apartment, Malik had sent her a voice note. His laughter filled the room, warm and innocent. "Trini, guess what? I sang your song at school today. Teacher said I sounded just like you." Her tears fell before she could stop them. He was proud, unshaken by doubt. But all she could think of was the distance between them, an ocean of sacrifice, misunderstandings, and unmet needs. 2 days later, David called her into his office. Papers and contracts cluttered the desk, his suit jacket draped over the chair. "You've been off," he said, studying her carefully. "Tell me what's going on." She hesitated, then whispered, "My family doesn't believe in this. They think I'm wasting time. I can't focus knowing they're struggling while I'm chasing something that might never pay off." David leaned forward, his voice low. "Do you think your mother will ever stop worrying? That's who she is. But let me ask you this. What happens if you walk away now? Will you regret it? Or worse, will your family regret it when they realize what could have been?" His words struck deep. But before she could answer, his assistant knocked and handed him a tablet. "You need to see this." On the screen was a viral post. Vanessa again, this time with a headline, "Trina J. can't handle the pressure." The video clip showed her faltering at rehearsal, her cracked note looped endlessly, mocking captions layered on top. Her stomach dropped. Someone had filmed her private session. David cursed under his breath. "They're watching every move you make. This isn't just competition, it's war." That night, she returned to her apartment, shaken. She pulled her curtains tight, checked her locks twice. The city outside felt hostile, every shadow watching. As she sat at her table, her phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. This one read, "You can't protect them forever. The more you rise, the more they'll suffer for it." Her blood ran cold. The messages weren't just about her anymore. They were about her family. The following Sunday, she logged into a video call with her siblings. Malik waved excitedly, his smile wide, her little sister tugging at his arm. "Trini, sing for us." Her heart cracked. Their innocence was untouched by the cruelty of the world, by the doubts that clawed at her. She hummed the lullaby their mother used to sing, her voice soft but steady. When the call ended, she sat in silence. The room was heavy, her reflection in the dark window staring back. For the first time, she realized that the distance between her and her family wasn't just miles. It was trust. Her mother saw duty. Her siblings saw magic. And she, caught in between, saw a storm that could swallow them all. And yet, deep in her chest, a spark still burned. A whisper that said, "Your voice is more than survival. It's your way forward." She wiped her tears, straightened her shoulders, and whispered to the empty room, "I can't let fear decide who I become. Trinica had always carried her family's hopes like a weight, but now those hopes clashed with her own. Would she fight to prove her voice could save them, or would their doubts bury her dream before it had a chance to bloom? If you were in her shoes, what would you choose, responsibility or destiny? Let us know in the comments below. The sun dipped low over Atlanta, staining the skyline in gold and orange as Trinica made her way to a small lounge downtown. David had arranged for her to attend, not to perform, just to watch. Networking, he called it. A chance to see how other artists carried themselves in front of a crowd. The lounge was intimate, lit by candles and neon accents, its stage barely big enough for a piano and a microphone stand. Aspiring singers waited their turn at the back, some clutching water bottles, others whispering lyrics under their breath. Trinica slid into a corner booth with David, trying to disappear into the dimness. She wanted to observe, not be observed. But halfway through the evening, her breath caught. Because there, stepping onto the stage with a sly smile and a sequin dress that shimmered under the lights, was Vanessa, her rival. The audience clapped politely as the host introduced her. Next up, the sensational Vanessa Cole. The name alone sent murmurs through the crowd. Vanessa had been circling the city like a hawk since the showcase, performing wherever she could, feeding interviews to anyone who would listen. And now here she was, in the same room as Trinica, as if fate had drawn them together once more. Vanessa's performance was dazzling. She belted out a high-tempo pop ballad, complete with dramatic hand gestures and practiced hair flips. The crowd responded with cheers, some rising to their feet by the final chorus. But Trinica couldn't shake what she saw beneath the glitter: desperation. Every note Vanessa sang felt forced, as though she were trying to convince herself she belonged. When the applause died down, Vanessa spotted Trinica in the corner. Her eyes narrowed, and her smile sharpened. She sauntered off stage, straight toward her. "Well, if it isn't Atlanta's little Cinderella," she said, her tone dripping with sweetness that barely masked the venom beneath. "I heard you've been making choices. Labels? Contracts? Or maybe just cracking under pressure." Trinica stiffened, her pulse quickening. David placed a firm hand on the table, ready to intervene, but Vanessa leaned closer. "You should know something, sweetheart," she whispered, loud enough for those nearby to overhear. "The industry doesn't care how you start. Viral waitress or not, they only care if you last. And between us, you won't." The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they echoed the fears already gnawing at her. Later that night, as Trinica stepped out of the lounge, the cool air hit her like a balm. She was about to call a cab when a voice stopped her. "Miss John." She turned. A man in a charcoal suit stood by the curb, his face unfamiliar but his stance confident. He handed her a sleek black envelope. "From a friend," he said, then walked away before she could respond. Her hands shook as she opened it under the streetlight. Inside was a photograph, her at the studio earlier that week, head bowed, voice strained, caught in a moment of weakness. Beneath it, a typed note. "She has eyes everywhere. Don't trust the people closest to you." Her stomach flipped. Was this connected to Vanessa? Or was someone else watching, feeding her rival fuel? She tucked the envelope into her bag, her heart hammering. For the first time, she realized Vanessa's war wasn't just public, it was personal. The following days proved it. Social media buzzed with clips Vanessa posted, side-by-side comparisons of their performances, captions like, "One of us is ready for the big stage. Guess which one?" Comment sections exploded with debates, fans tearing them both apart in defense of the other. One evening, a trending hashtag appeared, #Vanessa versus Trinica. David stormed into rehearsal with his phone in hand. "This isn't competition anymore. She's trying to drag you into a feud." Trinica's voice shook. "And it's working." He paced the room, frustration in every step. "She's feeding on your silence. But if you respond, you play her game. So what am I supposed to do?" David stopped, his gaze steady. "Outsing her. Not on social media. On stage." Let your voice answer what words can't. A week later, the chance arrived. A local charity event had invited both women to perform. It wasn't supposed to be a competition, but the organizers couldn't resist the drama of booking them back to back. The night of the event, the auditorium buzzed with energy. Cameras lined the aisles, reporters whispered into microphones, and fans filled the seats with posters and signs. Backstage, Trinica paced, her hands clammy, her throat tight. Every doubt pressed down on her at once. Her mother's warnings, Vanessa's taunts, the anonymous threats. Then she heard the crowd roar. Vanessa had taken the stage. Her rival strutted across the platform like it belonged to her, pouring every ounce of fire into a flashy pop anthem. The audience clapped, cheered, even danced in their seats. By the end, they were on their feet, chanting her name. Vanessa bowed, her eyes flicking backstage to where Trinica waited. The look she gave was not victory, it was challenge. Trinica stepped out to polite applause, but not the thunder that had greeted Vanessa. She stood in the spotlight, heart pounding, the microphone trembling in her hand. For a terrifying second, she froze. The crowd's anticipation pressed against her chest, heavy and suffocating. Then she remembered Malik's voice note. "You're the best singer in the world, Trini." She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and sang. Not the pop anthems Vanessa thrived on, not the polished tracks producers had pushed, but the song her mother used to hum while sweeping their yard in Jamaica, a gospel refrain, raw and unadorned. Her voice rose, trembling at first, then gaining strength. The auditorium fell silent. The cameras stopped moving. Even the reporters lowered their mics. By the chorus, something shifted. The crowd that had cheered Vanessa now sat spellbound, eyes glistening, hearts beating in rhythm with her song. When she reached the final note, the room erupted, not in polite applause, but in thunderous, standing ovation. And from the front row, Vanessa's painted smile faltered. Backstage, as Trinica caught her breath, Vanessa appeared, her heels clicking against the floor. "Don't get comfortable," she hissed, her mask of charm gone. "One night doesn't make a career. I'm not going anywhere." Trinica didn't answer. She didn't need to. The roar of the audience still echoed in her chest. For the first time, she understood what David meant. Words could be twisted, images could be stolen, but her voice, when she let it fly, was untouchable. The battle lines had been drawn. Vanessa wasn't just a rival anymore. She was a shadow determined to follow Trinica at every step. But if this night had proven anything, it was that the fight wouldn't be settled with insults. It would be settled with a song. The recording studio smelled faintly of burnt coffee and ozone from the endless hum of machines. It wasn't the cozy warmth of the Magnolia House or the raw energy of the showcase stage. It was sterile, controlled, designed for perfection. Trinica sat on the stool, headphones clamped over her ears, a microphone hanging inches from her lips. On the other side of the glass, a producer leaned back in his chair, tapping a pencil against the console. His name was Marcus, one of the city's most in-demand hitmakers. His resume boasted chart-topping singles and platinum albums. And yet, as he watched her, his expression was laced with doubt. "All right, sweetheart," Marcus said into the intercom. "Let's try it again. Remember, light, catchy, easy to dance to. Smile with your voice." The track began, a pop beat so glossy it shimmered, built for radio, not for soul. Trinica inhaled and tried to follow the melody. But her voice snagged, uncertain, slipping out of tune. "Stop, stop, stop," Marcus groaned, waving his hand. "Too heavy, too churchy. You're not leading a choir, you're selling a single." Her cheeks burned. She nodded, swallowing her frustration. Again, he ordered. For 3 hours, they repeated the same process. Each take sounded less like her and more like an echo of someone else. By the end, her throat ached, her voice cracked, and the once inviting studio felt like a cage. She ripped off the headphones, blinking back tears. "I can't sing it that way," she whispered. Marcus sighed, exasperated. Then maybe you're not ready. Viral videos don't make artists. Discipline does. The words cut deeper than he knew. She had fought so hard to be taken seriously, and now she was being dismissed as a novelty, a waitress with a lucky moment. From the corner of the studio, David Calloway stepped forward, his voice firm. She's not done. Give her a break. Marcus smirked. Breaks don't fix weak voices. Trinica's breath caught. Weak. The word echoed in her chest like a stone dropped in water. That night, she stumbled home in silence, her throat raw. She dropped onto her bed without even removing her shoes, staring at the ceiling as Marcus's voice replayed in her mind. Weak. Not ready. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She hesitated before reaching for it. A new message flashed across the screen. You cracked. The world saw. Maybe you're not meant for this after all. Her stomach flipped. Who was sending these messages? Was it Vanessa? Someone inside the studio? Or a stranger lurking closer than she realized? The fear pressed down on her, heavier than the exhaustion in her bones. 2 days later, David arranged for her to meet with an executive from a major label. Just listen, he urged as they rode the elevator up to the 22nd floor of a glass tower downtown. Don't commit to anything yet. The executive, a polished woman named Claire, greeted them with a firm handshake and a rehearsed smile. Her office was decorated with gold records and photographs of artists she had shepherded to fame. I've been following you, Claire said, gesturing for Trinica to sit. Your voice is remarkable, unique. But uniqueness needs packaging. And frankly, what I'm hearing doesn't sound ready for the mainstream. The sting was immediate. Another judgment. Another dismissal. Claire leaned forward, folding her manicured hands. Here's what I propose. We pair you with writers who understand the market. We reshape your sound. Think less gospel, more global. With the right push, you'll be unstoppable. Trinica forced a polite smile, but her chest felt tight. Everyone wanted to reshape her. No one wanted her. As they left the meeting, David studied her carefully. Talk to me. What are you thinking? She bit her lip, her eyes stinging. I think I'm not enough. Not for them. Not for my family. Not for anyone. David stopped walking, placing a hand on her shoulder. His voice was low but steady. Listen to me. They don't get to decide your worth. You do. The only question is, are you willing to fight for it? Her throat tightened. She wanted to believe him. But belief was harder than singing. That weekend, the Magnolia House held a community night, inviting locals to perform music, poetry, and spoken word. Trinica hadn't planned on singing, but Marlene, her sharp-tongued, soft-hearted co-worker, dragged her to the stage. Remind them who you are, Marlene whispered. The crowd cheered as she took the microphone. For a moment, she almost believed she could. But as she opened her mouth, the memory of Marcus's voice invaded her thoughts. Too heavy, too churchy, weak. Her throat tightened, the note broke. The room fell silent. Whispers rippled. Someone in the back muttered, "Guess the hype's over." Her chest constricted, her palms sweaty. She mumbled a shaky apology and rushed off stage, her heart pounding with humiliation. In the kitchen, she collapsed against the counter, tears burning her eyes. "I can't do this," she whispered. Marlene stormed in after her, arms crossed. "Stop it. You had one bad note." "It wasn't just one," Trinica cried. "It's every note. Every time I open my mouth, I hear them telling me I'm not enough. And maybe they're right." Marlene's expression softened. She cupped Trinica's face in her hands. "Girl, listen to me. They don't hear what I hear. They don't know what you carry. Your voice isn't weak. It's heavy because it's full of truth. Don't you dare let them convince you that's a flaw." Her words pierced through the fog of shame, but the doubt still lingered like a shadow. That night, back in her apartment, Trinica scrolled through social media. Clips of her crack performance at the Magnolia House had already spread, posted by someone in the audience. The comments were brutal. "Guess she's a one-hit wonder. Viral doesn't mean talent." Vanessa was right. Her chest tightened as tears blurred her vision. But then, buried among the cruelty, she saw a different kind of comment. From a stranger. Her voice may have cracked, but it was real. "I'd take real over fake any day." She read it again, then again, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Real. That was the word she had almost forgotten. The following morning, David called. "We have a problem," he said, his tone sharper than usual. Her heart sank. "What now?" "There's a rumor circulating. That you're unreliable. That you can't handle pressure. Vanessa's people are pushing it hard." Her stomach churned. "And people believe it." "Some do," he admitted. "But here's the thing. Rumors only live until you prove them wrong. You need to decide. Do you let this define you, or do you fight back?" She pressed the phone tighter against her ear, her hands trembling. For the first time, she realized the real battle wasn't with Vanessa, or Marcus, or the label executives. It was with herself. Trinica had tasted success, but now the cracks were showing. Cracks her enemies were eager to widen. Would she crumble under the weight of expectation, or would she rebuild stronger than before? If you were in her place, how would you respond? Hide from the pressure, or face it head on? Tell us in the comments below. The morning sun pierced through the blinds, but Trinica lay unmoving, her arm draped over her eyes. The weight of the past weeks pressed heavier than the Georgia heat. Every crack in her voice, every whisper of doubt online, every shadowy message, each one clung to her like a chain. Her phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand. When she finally reached for it, she saw hundreds of notifications, mentions, tags, comments. Some were adoring, but most weren't. Where's the voice now? She froze again. Amateur. Vanessa's the real star. She set the phone face down, her chest aching. Fame had promised light. Instead, it was casting shadows in every corner of her life. That afternoon, David knocked on her door, his sharp suit contrasting with the exhaustion in his eyes. He scanned the cluttered apartment, half-empty teacups, papers scattered, unopened envelopes. "You haven't been to rehearsal in 3 days?" he said softly. "I can't," she whispered, sinking deeper into the couch. "I open my mouth and nothing comes out. My voice is gone." David studied her carefully. "Your voice isn't gone, Trini. You're just letting them steal it before you sing." But she shook her head, tears pricking her eyes. "What if Marcus was right? What if I'm just a waitress who got lucky for one night?" David crouched down, his voice steady. "You're more than one night. But you've got to stand up, or they'll bury you in their stories." Later that week, she forced herself to attend a scheduled radio interview. The studio was buzzing, the hosts eager to pull her into their banter. "So, Trina J.," the main host said with a grin, purposely using the industry's rebranded name for her. "What's it like going from serving fried chicken to serving hits?" She winced at the nickname, but smiled politely. "It's been humbling." The co-host leaned in. "We heard you cracked at a local show. Nerves? Or maybe not enough practice?" Her throat tightened. She laughed awkwardly, trying to brush it off, but the damage was done. The segment aired within hours, and online clips painted her as fragile, unprofessional, a star already fading. That evening, another storm hit. A photo began circulating online. Trinica leaving her apartment late at night, hoodie pulled tight, head lowered. The caption, "Fame's getting to her. Looks like she can't handle the pressure." The comments were merciless. But the true shock came when she realized the photo wasn't taken by paparazzi. It was snapped from across the street, from someone who had been waiting outside her building. Her stomach twisted. She wasn't just being watched in the spotlight. She was being watched in the shadows too. 2 days later, she was scheduled for a private showcase, a chance to perform for executives from multiple labels at once. It was supposed to be an opportunity to silence the rumors. But as she stood backstage, microphone trembling in her hand, the walls seemed to close in. The crowd wasn't a sea of strangers anymore. They were judges, critics, shadows waiting for her to fail. Her breath came short. Sweat trickled down her back. She stepped forward, opened her mouth, and nothing came out. The silence stretched. Someone coughed. The executives exchanged glances. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought it might burst. She fled the stage, tears blurring her vision, her body shaking with shame. By the time she returned to her apartment, the news had already spread. Trina J. walks out mid-song. The story trended instantly, memes mocking her meltdown spreading faster than the truth. She collapsed on her bed, burying her face in her pillow, wishing she could disappear. Then, her phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown sender. This is just the beginning. Fame eats the weak. Protect yourself, or watch it destroy everything you love. Her hands trembled as she read it. This wasn't random trolling anymore. This was targeted, personal. And whoever it was, they were getting bolder. The next morning, Marlene barged into her apartment without knocking. "Girl, what are you doing in here?" she demanded, sweeping aside empty mugs and crumpled papers. "You're letting them win." Trinica sat up slowly, her eyes swollen. "I froze, Marlene. In front of everyone. I could hear them laughing before I even sang." Marlene planted her hands on her hips. "So what? You froze once. They'll forget tomorrow." "They won't forget," Trinica whispered. "Vanessa won't let them." Marlene sighed, her voice softening. "Vanessa can only take what you give her. And right now, you're giving her everything." That evening, David called her into his office. His desk was piled with contracts and notes, his phone buzzing constantly. "You need to know something," he said, his tone unusually grave. "I've been digging into the leaks. The rehearsal videos, the photos, the rumors, they're not just random. Someone close to us is feeding Vanessa's team." Her stomach dropped. "Close to us? Who?" "I don't know yet," David admitted. "But until we do, you need to keep your guard up. Don't trust anyone you're not sure about." The words made her skin crawl. She thought of the messages, the photos, the warnings. Whoever was sabotaging her wasn't just a rival. They were inside her circle. That night, she sat by her window, staring out at the city lights. Once, they had felt like stars guiding her forward. Now, they felt like eyes watching her every move. Her reflection in the glass looked hollow, exhausted. For the first time, she wondered if her mother had been right all along. Maybe this wasn't worth it. Maybe her voice wasn't strong enough to survive the weight of fame. But then her phone buzzed, not with another threat, but with a video from Malik. In it, he stood in their small Jamaican yard, singing the same gospel refrain she had sung at the charity event. His voice cracked, uneven, but his grin was radiant. "See, Trini? I sound just like you." Her tears fell silently, her chest aching with love and fear all at once. Maybe fame was heavy. Maybe it was cruel. But her voice wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to Malik, to her family, to every person who heard truth in her notes. And if she let it be silenced, she'd be silencing them too. Fame had cast its darkest shadow over Trinica, but even in the depths of humiliation and fear, a flicker of light remained. Would she let the shadow consume her, or fight to reclaim her voice from those who wanted to own it? The arena lights blazed like artificial suns, blinding and merciless. Rows upon rows of faces stretched into the shadows, a sea of strangers buzzing with anticipation. The event wasn't just any concert. It was a nationally televised fundraiser, broadcast live to millions. It was the kind of stage singers dreamt of, the kind of opportunity careers were built on. And it was the very stage where Trinica felt herself unraveling. Backstage, she sat in the makeup chair, staring at her reflection. The stylist dusted powder across her cheeks, but it wasn't her face staring back. It was a stranger's, tired eyes ringed with shadows, lips pressed into a line, shoulders sagging under invisible weight. "You ready, honey?" the stylist asked gently. Trinica forced a nod, though her stomach twisted. Her chest felt tight, her throat dry. No amount of water could quench the fear that clawed at her insides. David appeared at her side, his expression a mix of sternness and concern. "This is it, Trini. One song. That's all you need. Block out the noise and just sing." She opened her mouth to reply, but the words wouldn't come. She only nodded again, her heart pounding. As the stage manager called her name, she rose on trembling legs. The microphone was slick in her hand, as though it already knew it would slip away from her. The roar of the crowd hit like a wave as she stepped into the light. Cameras zoomed in. Screens magnified her every blink, her every breath. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host boomed, "give it up for the one and only Trinica John." Applause thundered, but in her ears, it warped into something else. A low hum of doubt, a chorus of whispers, weak, not ready, one-hit wonder. The music began, a soft piano intro, a ballad chosen specifically to showcase her range. The kind of song she could once sing effortlessly. She closed her eyes, inhaled, and lifted the mic. Nothing. Her throat locked, her voice strangled in her chest. Panic surged, her heart racing faster. She tried again, forcing sound out. A note escaped, shaky and thin. The audience shifted. Murmurs spread. The pianist glanced up, uncertain. Her hands shook so violently, she almost dropped the microphone. The lights grew hotter, harsher. The whispers in her mind roared louder. Weak. Not ready. A waitress playing star. She stumbled back a step, her knees trembling. The crowd was no longer cheering. It was restless, confused. Cameras zoomed closer, capturing every second of her unraveling. Then, from somewhere in the arena, a voice shouted, "Sing, Trini." Her head jerked toward the sound. A child, no older than Malik, stood on his seat, cupping his hands around his mouth. His face was lit with the kind of faith only children carried, pure and unwavering. For a flicker of a moment, her chest loosened. She remembered Malik's voice notes, his smile, the way he believed she was invincible. But then the murmurs drowned it out again. The weight was too heavy, the air too thin, her vision blurred. And before she could stop herself, she lowered the mic and fled the stage. The crowd erupted in confusion. The pianist stumbled to a halt. The host tried to smooth it over with nervous laughter, but the damage was already done. Backstage, Trinica collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath, tears streaking her makeup. David rushed to her, his face pale. "Trini, what happened?" She choked on the words. I couldn't breathe." He crouched beside her, gripping her shoulders. "Listen to me. You are not done. One bad moment doesn't define you." But she shook her head violently. "Millions of people just watch me fail. I'm finished." By the time she returned to her apartment, the internet had already erupted. Clips of her silence on stage spread across every platform. Memes mocked her blank stare. Headlines blared. "Trina J chokes on live TV." The comments were brutal. Knew she couldn't handle it. Back to waiting tables. Vanessa would never. Her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. "I warned you. Fame eats the weak. Walk away before it takes the rest of you." Her hands shook so violently she dropped the phone. The next morning, she stayed in bed, unable to face the world. Marlene stormed into her apartment, arms crossed, her face set in a mix of fury and heartbreak. "What is this, Trini? You hiding under the covers while they tear you apart?" Tears welled in her eyes. I froze, Marlene. I humiliated myself in front of the whole world. Maybe Mama was right. Maybe I'm not built for this. Marlene softened, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Do you know what I saw when you stepped on that stage? I saw a woman carrying more weight than any one person should. And you cracked. Yes, but cracks don't mean you're broken. They mean you've been tested." But Trinica shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know if I can try again." That evening, as the city buzzed with life outside, she sat in silence, staring at the ceiling. Her phone lay on the table, screen black. Then it buzzed, not with hate, not with threats, but with a video call. Malik. She hesitated before answering. His smiling face filled the screen, his voice bursting with excitement. "Trini, we saw you on TV." Mama was so nervous, she kept holding her breath. Her chest ached. "Malik, I failed." But he shook his head, his grin unshaken. You didn't fail. You just stopped. That means next time, you keep going. Her tears fell silently as she listened. Even across the ocean, his faith reached her where her own could not. When the call ended, she sat in the quiet, the weight of her humiliation still pressing down. But now, faintly, a flicker of determination glowed beneath it. She had broken in front of millions. But maybe, just maybe, breaking wasn't the end. Maybe it was the place where rebuilding began. Trinica had reached her lowest point, the world watching her fall apart under the glare of the spotlight. But as shadows closed in, one voice reminded her that failure wasn't final. It was a pause before the next note. Atlanta's skyline glittered in the distance, but for Trinica, its glow had dimmed. The city that once symbolized possibility now felt like a cage. Every street corner whispered her failure. Every shadow hid a camera. So when David suggested she step away for a while, she didn't argue. He booked the flight quietly, away from prying eyes. And 3 days later, she found herself staring out of a plane window as the lush greens of Jamaica rolled into view below. Her chest tightened. Home. At the airport in Kingston, the humid air wrapped around her like an embrace. It smelled of rain-soaked earth, roasted peanuts from the vendors, and salt carried inland from the sea. She clutched her bag tightly as she stepped outside, scanning the crowd until she saw him. Malik. He was taller than she remembered, but his grin hadn't changed. He waved wildly, nearly dropping the cardboard sign he'd made. Welcome home, Star. Tears pricked her eyes as she rushed forward, pulling him into a fierce hug. For the first time in months, she felt something solid under her feet. Their small family home hadn't changed much. The same peeling paint, the same cracked step on the porch, the same hibiscus bush her mother tended every morning. But when Trinica entered, her mother was waiting with arms folded, her expression unreadable. You're back, she said simply. Yes, Mama, Trinica whispered. I needed to. Rest? Hi. Her mother's voice was sharp, but not cruel. People back here talk, Trini. They saw what happened on TV. Some say you're not strong enough for that life. The words stung, but this time, Trinica didn't argue. She bowed her head. Maybe they're right. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then her mother sighed and turned toward the kitchen. Eat first. Talk later. That evening, Trinica sat outside under the stars. Malik sprawled beside her on the porch steps. Crickets sang in the distance, and the air was heavy with the scent of sugar cane. You know what I tell my friends? Malik said, breaking the silence. What? That my sister's the bravest person I know. Because you went up there, in front of all those people, and you tried. Her throat tightened. But I failed. No, Malik said firmly. You just stopped too soon. The simplicity of his faith struck her harder than any critique. The next morning, she wandered down the narrow dirt road leading into town. Children chased each other barefoot. Women balanced baskets on their heads. Men hammered nails into boards at a construction site. And then she heard it. Music. She followed the sound to the church at the end of the street. Inside, the choir was rehearsing, voices rising in layered harmony that filled the air like sunlight. Without thinking, she slipped inside, sliding into a back pew. She listened as they sang, a hymn she had grown up with, familiar and grounding. The choir director, a stout man with a booming laugh, spotted her. Well, look who it is. The whole world's been talking about you, Trinica John. You hiding from fame in my church. The room chuckled, but his tone was kind. He extended a hand. Come, sing with us. Her heart pounded. She wanted to refuse. But something in his eyes, something warm, unwavering, pulled her forward. Standing among the choir, the notes felt different. They weren't polished or forced. They weren't for ratings or critics. They were for joy, for truth. When her voice joined theirs, it trembled at first, but then steadied. She closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. For the first time since the showcase, she felt free. And when the final chord rang out, the room erupted in applause. not for perfection, but for presence. That night, as she walked home, an older woman stopped her in the street. Her face was lined with age, her eyes bright. "Child," the woman said, gripping her hand, "don't let them change you. That voice, God gave it to you. Not the labels, not the managers. Don't forget that." Trinika's breath caught. The words felt less like advice and more like prophecy. The following day, her mother joined her in the yard, sweeping quietly. For a long while, they worked side by side in silence. Finally, her mother spoke. "When you left, I was afraid. Afraid that the world would chew you up and spit you out. When I saw you on that stage, silent, it broke me, Trini, because I thought my fear had come true." Tears blurred Trinika's vision. Maybe it did. Her mother shook her head. "No, because you came back. And that means you still have fight left in you." Trinika's chest ached. For the first time, her mother wasn't warning her away from music. She was reminding her of why she started. On her last night in Jamaica, Malik dragged her to a small gathering in the town square. A makeshift stage had been set up, and locals took turns singing, drumming, dancing. When the crowd spotted her, chants rose. "Sing, Trini, sing." She hesitated, her heart pounding. But Malik nudged her forward, his grin wide. "Show them." So she did. She stepped onto the stage, microphone trembling in her hand, and began to sing a song her grandmother used to hum, a lullaby carried through generations. Her voice carried over the crowd, raw and unpolished, but alive. By the final note, the square erupted in cheers. Children clapped, elders nodded, strangers shouted her name with pride. In that moment, she realized something. She didn't need arenas or record executives to validate her. Her voice had always been enough. As the plane carried her back to Atlanta the next morning, she looked out at the clouds, her chest lighter. The world might still doubt her. Vanessa might still stalk her. The industry might still try to reshape her. But she had remembered who she was. And no one, not critics, not rivals, not anonymous shadows, could take that from her again. In Jamaica, Trinika found the truth she had forgotten. Her voice wasn't meant to be perfect. It was meant to be real. With her spirit rekindled, she was ready to face the world again. The hum of Atlanta returned as the plane descended, the skyline glittering like a crown of steel and glass. But for Trinika, it no longer loomed with the same weight. Jamaica had reminded her of who she was. Her family, her roots, her voice. Those were anchors no storm could tear away. As she stepped back into her apartment, the stale air of her absence greeted her. The reminders of her breakdown still lingered. Unwashed mugs, unopened letters, the memory of silence on a stage broadcast to millions. But instead of crushing her, those ghosts now felt like warnings she'd survived. She set her suitcase down and whispered to the empty room. Not this time. Not their way. The next morning, she called David. "I'm not singing their songs anymore," she said firmly. "Not pop anthems written to make me sound like somebody else. If I sing my way." There was a pause on the line. Then David chuckled softly, though there was an edge of worry. "Do you know how risky that is, Trini? Labels don't gamble on authenticity. They gamble on what sells." "Then maybe I don't need their gamble." For the first time, her voice carried no hesitation. David came to her apartment that evening, carrying a folder thick with contracts. He laid them out on her table, the fine print gleaming under the dim light. "These are the offers still standing," he said. "Some have backed out since the fundraiser, but a few are still interested, if you're willing to compromise." She flipped through the papers, each page filled with promises that smelled like chains. Tours, sponsorships, fame, all in exchange for control. She pushed them back toward him. "No." David's brows furrowed. "Trini, I can't sign away my voice, David. If I fail, I'll fail as myself." For a long moment, he studied her. Then, to her surprise, he smiled faintly. "All right, then let's do it your way." The next week, she rented a small rehearsal space on the outskirts of the city. The walls were cracked, the floor scuffed, but the room was hers. She set up a second-hand keyboard, borrowed a guitar from Marlene's cousin, and began to write. At first, the songs came slowly, fragments of melody, half-finished lyrics. But as days passed, the words poured out. Songs about her childhood, about sweeping yards with her mother, about Malik's laughter, about breaking under the weight of expectation and finding herself again. Her voice, raw and unpolished, filled the empty room until even the walls seemed to listen. One evening, Malik called unexpectedly. "Trini," he said breathlessly, "Mama's listening to your videos." "My videos?" she frowned. He grinned, turning the phone camera. On the screen, her mother sat by the radio, her eyes closed as a recording of one of Trinika's new songs played from Malik's laptop. Her mother opened her eyes slowly, meeting the camera. "It sounds like home," she whispered. Tears blurred Trinika's vision. For the first time, her mother wasn't questioning her music. She was receiving it. Encouraged, she decided to take another risk. Instead of chasing label meetings, she uploaded one of her songs to the internet herself. No flashy production, no polished visuals, just her, a microphone, and her truth. The response was immediate. Thousands of views turned to tens of thousands. Comments flooded in. "This isn't just music. It's a story. I felt every word." Finally, something real. Her inbox filled with messages from strangers who said her song helped them through grief, heartbreak, or loneliness. For the first time, the internet wasn't mocking her, it was embracing her. But not everyone was pleased. 2 days later, Vanessa posted a glossy new single with heavy production and a neon-lit video. The caption read, "This is how you make real music." The media jumped at the rivalry, pitting the two women against each other again. Headlines buzzed. Vanessa versus Trinika. Who will win the industry's crown? But this time, Trinika didn't flinch. She didn't reply. She didn't post a clap back. She just kept singing. And to her surprise, the silence spoke louder than any feud. One evening, David showed up at her rehearsal space with someone new, a young woman no older than 17, clutching a worn guitar case. "Trini," David said, "this is Amara. She reminds me of you. Works in a bakery by day, writes music by night. I thought maybe you could." His voice trailed, but the look in his eyes was clear, mentor her. At first, Trinika hesitated. She was barely holding herself together. How could she guide someone else? But when Amara shyly pulled out her guitar and played a trembling song about wanting more than the life she'd been handed, something inside Trinika stirred. She remembered herself, before the showcase, before the spotlight, before the fear. And without thinking, she began to sing along. The harmony was rough, unpolished, but beautiful. Amara's eyes widened. "You're just like me." "No." Trinika smiled softly. "You're just like you. Don't forget that." That night, as she walked home, the city lights shimmered differently. Not as enemies, not as eyes watching her, but as sparks. Her journey wasn't just about proving herself anymore. It was about carving a path others could follow, without losing themselves in the process. 2 weeks later, she performed her first self-written showcase. No industry executives, no contracts, just a rented community hall, folding chairs, and a crowd of people who wanted to hear her. Marlene helped set up. David managed the sound. Amara opened with a trembling but heartfelt performance. And then Trinika stepped onto the stage. Her voice trembled at first, but then rose steady, carrying songs no one had heard before. Songs of roots, resilience, and rebirth. By the end of the night, the small hall roared with applause, some people on their feet, others wiping tears. It wasn't an arena. It wasn't millions watching, but it was hers. Trinika had chosen authenticity over compromise, and in doing so, she discovered a power greater than fame, the power of truth. With her music reborn, she wasn't just surviving the industry anymore. She was redefining it. The night of the International Music Awards was electric. The arena pulsed with anticipation, flashes of cameras exploding like lightning, reporters scrambling to capture every glittering moment. The red carpet shimmered with sequins and silk, a parade of artists from every corner of the world. For weeks, whispers had swirled. Trinica and Vanessa were both set to perform. The media framed it not as two individual showcases, but as a battle. The waitress versus the diva. Raw soul versus polished pop. And for once, both women leaned into it. Backstage, Trinica sat in her dressing room, her gown simple but elegant, her hair pulled back to let her face shine. She had insisted on no heavy styling, no glittering spectacle. Her music, she told David, would be enough. But inside, her hands trembled. She could hear the muffled roar of the audience, the pounding of bass from other performances. And worse, she could hear the voice of doubt that had haunted her since the fundraiser. What if you break again? What if silence is all you have left? David placed a hand on her shoulder. Remember Jamaica. Remember that hall full of people who cried when you sang the truth. Don't compete with Vanessa. Remind them who you are. She nodded, inhaling deeply. The stage manager called Vanessa first. The crowd erupted as she strode out, sequin gown catching the lights, backup dancers fanning out behind her. Her performance was a spectacle, pounding beats, flashing pyrotechnics, perfectly choreographed moves. She belted her lines with practiced power, her smile dazzling, her presence commanding. By the finale, the crowd was screaming her name, banners waving in the air. Backstage, Trinica watched from the monitor. The scale of it was intimidating. She had no dancers, no fireworks, no elaborate staging. Just her and her voice. For a flicker of a moment, fear tightened her chest. But then she remembered Malik's grin, her mother's quiet admission, the church choir's harmony. She wasn't here to dazzle. She was here to move. When the host announced her name, the applause was polite, hesitant after Vanessa's fireworks. She stepped into the light, her gown shimmering faintly but without excess. No dancers, no spectacle, just a stool, a single spotlight, and a microphone. The silence was thick as she sat down, the crowd unsure of what to expect. She closed her eyes, gripped the mic, and began. The first note was soft, almost fragile. A hush fell over the arena. Slowly, her voice grew, trembling at first, then steady, then soaring. She sang one of her new songs, about fear, about breaking, about finding strength in the cracks. No instruments but the piano behind her. No embellishments. Her voice carried through the arena like a prayer. And something shifted. The crowd leaned in. Phones lowered. Even the chatter of reporters stilled. By the chorus, thousands of faces reflected tears glistening in the lights. When she reached the final line, she let the note linger, raw and imperfect, but real. The arena erupted. Thunderous applause, louder than Vanessa's fireworks. People rose to their feet, clapping, shouting her name. The ovation didn't stop. It built, wave after wave, until even the cameras struggled to capture the sheer force of it. Backstage, Vanessa watched, her smile frozen, her fingers digging into her sequin gown. For the first time, she realized, no matter how polished, how choreographed, how grand her performance was, she could not manufacture the connection Trinica created in one unguarded song. When Trinica returned backstage, breathless, David's eyes shone with pride. "You didn't just win the crowd," he said softly. "You reminded them what music is supposed to be." But before she could reply, Vanessa appeared in the doorway. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned. "Enjoy it, waitress," she said quietly. "But remember, spotlights move. And when they leave you, I'll still be here." Then she turned sharply, her heels clicking against the floor as she disappeared down the hall. Later that night, social media exploded. Clips of Vanessa's glittering performance were shared widely, but clips of Trinica's stripped-down ballad spread like wildfire. Headlines blared. "The night authenticity beat spectacle. From waitress to warrior, Trinica John owns the stage." Who needs fireworks when you have a voice like this? For once, The narrative wasn't about her failure. It wasn't about Vanessa's rivalry. It was about her. But the biggest surprise came the next morning. David knocked on her door, holding a letter. "This came for you." She unfolded it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note. "Your voice reminded me of why I fell in love with music in the first place. I want to work with you, not to change you, but to help the world hear you as you are." It was signed by one of the industry's most respected producers, known for rejecting the cookie-cutter sound that dominated the charts. Her hands shook as she held the letter. For the first time, the industry wasn't asking her to compromise. It was asking her to lead. That evening, as she stood on her balcony overlooking the city, she thought back to the girl who once balanced trays at the Magnolia House, humming quietly to herself between orders. That girl had been mocked, doubted, silenced. But she had never stopped singing. Now, the world wasn't just listening. It was waiting. And she was ready. The International Music Awards had been framed as a battle between rivals. But in the end, it wasn't about competition. It was about courage. The courage to sing truthfully in a world obsessed with spectacle. If you were in the spotlight, would you choose fireworks that dazzle or words that endure? Share your answer in the comments. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Your support means the world to us. The morning after the International Music Awards, Atlanta awoke to headlines splashed across every newsstand, every phone screen, every whisper in coffee shops and buses. The waitress who outshined the diva. No glitter, no dancers, just a voice that stopped time. Trinica John redefines what it means to perform. For once, the spotlight didn't burn. It illuminated. But in Trinica's small apartment, the celebration was quiet. She sat at her table, mug of ginger tea in hand, staring at the letter from the legendary producer who had reached out the night before. His words repeated in her mind. Not to change you, but to help the world hear you as you are. For the first time, the industry wasn't demanding a mask. It was offering a megaphone. David arrived mid-morning, a rare smile tugging at his usually composed face. "You broke the internet, Trini. I don't think Vanessa's even trending anymore." She chuckled softly, though her eyes held more gratitude than triumph. "I didn't want to beat her. I just wanted to be me." "That's why you did beat her," David said simply. He placed a folder on the table. "And now the question is, what next?" Inside the folder were invitations, talk shows, international festivals, endorsement deals. Opportunities she once would have begged for. But instead of excitement, she felt a calm clarity. "I don't want to chase every door," she said. "I want to choose the ones that don't ask me to leave myself behind." David studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Then that's exactly what we'll do." Later that week, she returned to the Magnolia House. The restaurant buzzed louder than ever, packed wall to wall, people spilling into the street. But this time, she wasn't carrying trays or taking orders. She walked in wearing the same simple dress she'd worn at the showcase, her presence quiet but magnetic. Raymond, the manager, practically burst into tears as he hugged her. "Look at you," he said, his voice thick. "And you came back." "I told you," she smiled. "I'd never forget where it started." At first, she had only planned to visit, to greet old co-workers and neighbors. But when someone shouted, "Sing for us, Trini," the crowd erupted in agreement. She hesitated, then laughed softly. "All right, one song." Standing in the same corner where she had first been asked to sing as a joke, she lifted her voice once more. No lights, no cameras, no grandeur. Just her. And somehow, it was more powerful than the arena ovation. Because here, in this place, she wasn't a star. She was family. When she finished, the applause shook the room. People pounding tables, some wiping tears. Marlene rushed forward, hugging her so tight, she almost couldn't breathe. "You did it, girl," Marlene whispered fiercely. "You kept your soul." In that moment, Trinica realized something. Winning awards, gaining headlines, that wasn't the victory. The real triumph was standing in the same place she had once been mocked and knowing she hadn't lost herself. But there was one more resolution waiting. That evening, she sat on her porch, phone in hand, staring at her mother's number. Her palms sweated as she pressed call. When her mother answered, her voice was soft but steady. "Trini." "Mama," she whispered, her throat tight. "Did you see the awards?" "I saw." Silence stretched, heavy with years of doubt and distance. Finally, her mother spoke again. "When you walked off that stage months ago, I was afraid it was over. But last night, I saw the girl I raised. Not just a singer, a fighter." Tears blurred Trinika's vision. "So you're proud of me?" For the first time, her mother's voice cracked. "More than proud. I'm grateful. You carried us further than I ever dreamed. And I was wrong to fear your gift." The release was overwhelming. Years of longing answered in a single confession. Trinika pressed the phone to her ear, crying silently as her mother's voice wrapped around her like the lullabies of childhood. Weeks later, she stood in the same church where her faith had once wavered. The choir welcomed her warmly, and when she sang with them, the walls trembled with joy. This time, her mother sat in the front pew, and when their eyes met, there was no worry, no doubt, only pride. One evening, as she walked home from rehearsal, she passed a group of teenagers huddled on a street corner, strumming guitars, singing off-key. They noticed her and froze, starstruck. "You're her," one of them gasped. "You're Trinika John." She smiled, crouching beside them. "Don't stop. Keep singing." The kids exchanged nervous glances, then began again. Their voices cracked, their chords clumsy, but their joy was undeniable. Trinika sang with them, harmonizing softly, until the whole block was alive with music. Cars slowed, neighbors leaned from windows, and strangers clapped along. And in that moment, she understood her path wasn't just about stages and awards. It was about sparking songs in others. Back in her apartment that night, she received a message from the producer again. "I don't want to shape you. I want to amplify you. Let's create something the industry can't ignore, not because it's shiny, but because it's true." Her hands trembled as she read it. She wasn't just stepping into a career. She was stepping into purpose. The resolution wasn't in defeating Vanessa or conquering the industry. It was in reconciling with her family, returning to her roots, and realizing that her voice could heal not just herself, but those around her. Months had passed since the International Music Awards, but the memory of that night still lingered like a melody in the air. Offers continued to arrive, festivals, collaborations, interviews. Yet Trinika no longer felt consumed by the scramble to prove herself. She had found her rhythm. Not the industry's, not Vanessa's, not the world's. Her own. Her first independent album, Roots and Wings, had just been released. Every track carried a piece of her journey, songs of hardship, of doubt, of breaking and rebuilding. Some were quiet hymns, others pulsed with reggae rhythms, and one was dedicated to Malik, who bragged to everyone at school that his sister had written him into history. The critics were stunned, not because it sounded like everything else on the radio, but because it didn't. Raw, unfiltered, unafraid. One review called it a voice that refuses to be packaged. But what mattered most wasn't the reviews or the streams. It was the people who reached out to say her songs had carried them through grief, loneliness, and fear. The letters poured in from every corner of the world, each one a reminder that her music had planted seeds far beyond the places she'd ever been. One morning, she found herself back at the Magnolia House, now busier than ever. A framed photo of her hung by the entrance, and the restaurant's chalkboard proudly displayed her album cover with the words, "Our Trinika did it." As she stepped inside, Raymond beamed and shouted, "Family, our star is home." The crowd cheered, clapping her on the back, asking for autographs and selfies. But then something unexpected happened. A young waitress, no older than Trinika had been when her journey began, approached nervously. "Miss John," she said shyly, "I heard your story. I sing too. Do you think someone like me could ever?" Her voice trailed off, uncertain, but her eyes carried the same hope Trinica once feared to admit. Trinica smiled gently. I think someone like you already has what it takes. The question is, are you ready to fight for it? The girl nodded eagerly, her eyes shining. And in that moment, Trinica realized she had become what she once needed. Proof that ordinary beginnings could bloom into extraordinary paths. Weeks later, she returned to Jamaica, not for retreat this time, but to give back. She organized a free workshop in her old church, inviting young singers from the community. Dozens arrived, clutching notebooks, guitars, and trembling courage. Standing before them, Trinica felt a lump in her throat. She wasn't the shy waitress anymore. She was their mirror, their possibility. Your voice is yours, she told them, her tone fierce with conviction. Don't let anyone convince you to trade it for something shinier. What makes you different is what makes you powerful. The room erupted in applause, and as the first student stepped forward to sing, Trinica felt something deeper than applause or ovations. She felt legacy taking root. Back in Atlanta, Vanessa's name still floated in the media, but the feud that once consumed Trinica no longer mattered. One evening, scrolling through social media, she saw Vanessa post a cryptic message. Sometimes the loudest voices get the stage. Sometimes the truest voices keep it. For a moment, Trinica considered reaching out. Not with anger, but with understanding. They had both been fighting battles the world couldn't see. Maybe one day, the rivalry would give way to something else. Maybe. But for now, her path was her own. The true climax of her journey came not on a grand stage, but in a small schoolyard back in Jamaica. She had returned again, this time surprising Malik at his school assembly. The principal handed her a microphone, and she began to sing a lullaby their mother had once hummed under the stars. The children clapped and swayed, their voices joining hers. And there, in the simple joy of their chorus, she felt the full circle of her story. From waitress to viral sensation, from silence to ovations, from breaking to rebuilding, every step had led here. To this moment, where her gift wasn't just for herself, but for the generations rising behind her. That evening, back at her family's home, her mother sat beside her on the porch. The hibiscus bush swayed in the breeze, and the sound of Malik laughing with his friends drifted from the yard. Her mother reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. You carried us, Trini, and you carried yourself. I see now that your voice wasn't a gamble. It was a blessing. Tears welled in Trinica's eyes, but this time they were sweet. She leaned against her mother's shoulder, feeling the peace of reconciliation, of roots holding firm even as wings stretched wide. Months later, as she stood on another stage, this time in London, thousands of miles from home, she looked out at the crowd and smiled. The lights were bright, the applause thunderous, but in her mind, she saw only the Magnolia House, Malik's grin, her mother's tears, and the children in the schoolyard. She lifted the microphone, her voice steady, and began to sing. Not for fame, not for survival, but for legacy. Trinica's journey had begun as a waitress mocked into singing for a laugh. It had led through envy, doubt, sabotage, and breaking under pressure. But in the end, she rose, not as an industry puppet, not as Vanessa's rival, but as herself. Her story wasn't about chasing the spotlight. It was about keeping her light and sharing it so others could shine.
Thank you so much for staying with me all the way to the end of this story. If there's one lesson we can take from Trinica's journey, it's this. No matter how many times life tries to silence you, your true voice will always find a way to rise above the noise. If Trinica's story moved you, let us know in the comments what part of her journey inspired you the most. Please support the channel by hitting that subscribe button, sharing this video with your friends and loved ones. You are helping us spread inspiration to even more people around the world. I'll be posting another powerful story tomorrow, so don't miss it. And before you go, check out the previous video that's right here on your screen. I promise you'll love it.